It's been 5 years since the launch of Marvel's Avengers back in 2020. A game that had the potential to be the ultimate superhero experience, but ended up becoming one of gaming's biggest disappointments. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is the Avenger, and today we're going in depth. We're going to discuss the highs, the lows, we're going to discuss the stories and characters, but more importantly, we're going to discuss what went wrong and whether the game actually deserved the fate it has. So everybody grab a snack, grab a drink, let's dive on in. Back in 2017, Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics announced the Avengers project. The internet exploded. It was amazing. This was hot off the success of Marvel's Spider-Man on the PS4 at the time, and fans were expecting an open-world Avengers game with all the heroes we love. Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Captain America. The hype was real. And then we had our first gameplay reveal back at E3 in 2019. We noticed something strange. The character designs didn't match the MCU look, and the combat seemed clunky at the time, and the early beta impressions were sort of mixed. Still, excitement stayed strong. After all, it is the Avengers. We're going to talk about a little bit of the beta, which I personally loved playing the beta. I did not encounter a lot of errors or anything on my part. I was also playing on the PS4, so I wasn't really on the PS5 at all. But I loved the beta. It was I loved it. It was amazing. It was an amazing experience. Coming home from school, turning on that PlayStation, having the beta weekend on. It was just amazing. I grinded the frick out of the Hulk on that one. And then the game launched. So it launched in September of 2020, and technically, it wasn't a total disaster. The single-player campaign had moments of brilliance, especially introducing Kamala Khan as Miss Marvel, and she was the heart of the story. Her optimism and the fangirl energy she gave the game a lot of charm. The story was amazing, and there was a lot of amazing first impressions of the story. However, there were some negative first impressions. First of all, the game had a lot of performance problems on consoles and PC, especially during the PS4 era, where that game wasn't really optimized to take games designed for PS5 at the time as well. It had a lot of repetitive mission design to an extent, especially during the endgame content, and the endgame content felt a lot empty than what you would want it to be. And a massive reliance on microtransactions despite being a full-priced game. Players quickly realized this wasn't the live service experience that they hoped for, and it was more of a loot grind with very little reward. We're going to talk about the positives of the game and what the game did right. Firstly, the story was solid. Kamala Khan's introduction was praised. The story was, personally to myself, I praised the story a lot because it's a unique Avengers story. You go from having the Avengers team up at the start of the game to the fall of the Avengers to Kamala Khan picking up the pieces of what's left of the Avengers and what it means to be a hero and uniting them all together for one more time in a way. And then they realize Cap's actually alive, and we fight MODOK. MODOK was an amazing villain. I loved to have MODOK in the game as the villain. It was pretty cool to have AIM as well. It was cool to have Abomination, Taskmaster. The boss fights were neat. I loved them. Each character felt unique as well, which we're going to talk about a little bit more here. Combat mechanics and the heroes like Iron Man and Black Widow, they felt fun once you mastered each character, and each character was unique. They had their own abilities. Thor was able to throw hammers at people and have like his hammer lying down on one of the aimbots, and you can start punching people with lightning hands. Iron Man can fly. You can switch between repulsor to laser, from laser to rockets. You can do the uni-beam. You've got the Hulkbuster as Captain America. You've got your shield. You throw your shield at people, which is pretty cool. And Hulk was literally Hulk. Hulk smash. It's like a tank roaming around the mini map of the game. The visuals and the animations, especially after the game's patches, were impressive. And I'm someone who played the game primarily on the PS4, but I also played the game years after release, so I didn't really have the first impressions of and the negative impressions of the bug issues that a lot of people had. So I was playing on the PS4 for the first time when I got the game back in, I think it was 2023 or 2022. It was definitely 2022, and I loved it. I loved the story. I loved everything about the game up until the end, post-game content, but it was pretty cool. And then switching from PS4 to PS5, you see a drastic change in not only the visuals but the gameplay. The gameplay felt smoother on the PS5, and the game just felt good. They also gave us free DLC. They gave us Hawkeye DLC. They gave us a Black Panther expansion pack. Characters like Jane and Winter Soldier also were introduced as DLC characters. At its core, the game had a lot of potential, but the potential alone doesn't save a live service title. We're going to break down the story. The narrative starts on A-Day, when the Avengers are celebrating themselves being heroes and saving the world numerous times. However, disaster kind of strikes in, killing thousands and causing Captain America's supposed death. There was some, I forgot the name of the liquid or the explosion that kind of created superhero powers in people, but Taskmaster was, in San Francisco doing his thing, killing people because why not? And then Captain America tries to save everyone, and the helicarrier starts collapsing into the water, and it explodes, and some chemical thing gets mixed in, and people end up having superpowers, and gave Kamala Khan her superpowers, but they all deemed them as sick, not as superheroes, not as people with powers. They deemed them as sick. We then follow the journey of Kamala Khan trying to recruit, or not really recruit, but trying to she knows there's something off in AIM, to trying to figure that out and what's going on, and then AIM starts trying to chase her down. So then she ends up with Bruce Banner, who was able to save her, and then from there we have the dynamic duo for the time being in the game with Kamala and Bruce. You fight Abomination, but the story builds up. You realize that we know the Avengers broke up after Banner labeled them as a threat, and we have that experience with the Avengers that at this point in time they're not the heroes the world wants them to be, and AIM has fully taken over. If we follow Kamala's story, reuniting Banner with Iron Man and Natasha as well, and then bringing Thor in, we then get the reveal that Captain America is alive. We follow the journey of the heroes from their fall to regrouping, and by the end of the game, Captain America returns, AIM is defeated, we defeat MODOK, and the Avengers assemble once more. We get a lot of future expansions introducing Hawkeye and Kate Bishop, and the War for Wakanda storyline, which was easily the best gaming moment in that game. Best DLC pack we've had in a game, I'm going to say for a very long time, other than the City That Never Sleeps DLC for the Spider-Man games. It was a pretty amazing expansion pack that came for free, with Black Panther as the main lead and Claw as the villain. But even with these expansions, the story never felt connected to something bigger. There was no true endgame narrative, and instead it became a repetitive cycle of fighting robots, grind gear, and just repeat. Something that I wish this game did was have a proper endgame content, like something like Spider-Man, where the game it ends, but you can free roam the city, you get collectibles, and there's still other stuff to do. Side missions, stuff like that. In Avengers, you do the mission, you complete the story, and that's it. It feels like everything you've done throughout the story kind of means nothing, because all you're doing is farming gear. And here's where it all unraveled. Marvel's Avengers tried to be Destiny and Anthem at the same time, but it failed as both. They had a live service problem. It had a loot system with random gear drops with tiny stat boosts that barely changed gameplay. It was cosmetics were locked behind grind or paid packs, which was kind of the worst part of it. There's a lot of cool skins they had introduced throughout the game. However, they were usually 9 times out of 10 locked to a paywall or a pack or even grinding gear. And I think players, including myself, hated that the most, which is why I personally never spent any money on this game, and I'm thankful I did not do that, because everything was for free at the end of when they shut down the servers, and it had no true endgame content. Once you finish the campaign, the game became a repetitive treadmill of faction missions, hives, and villain sectors. Crystal Dynamics kept promising bigger updates, but they came too slow. Spider-Man was marketed as a PlayStation exclusive hero, but his release was underwhelming. There was no story missions, and he barely had any content. And you know, I love Spider-Man, and Spider-Man's got to be I think my favorite superhero other than Batman. That kind of tied together, to be honest. But having Spider-Man thrown into a game, number one, locked to PlayStation exclusive, you know, is kind of annoying for the Xbox people. But at the same time, he didn't feel like Spider-Man. It felt like having, and this is the best way that I can describe it, imagine you have an amazing game like Arkham Knight. You know, the beautiful visuals, an amazing story, an amazing game. Batman plays flawlessly. But then you have another character introduced as, for example, Nightwing. But when you're playing it, it's Gotham Knight's Nightwing. It's not the Arkham City Nightwing. That's the easiest way that I can kind of explain it. And that kind of felt underwhelming for Spider-Man. From going to play PS4 Spider-Man to then playing this version of Spider-Man, it didn't feel like Spider-Man. It felt like I was a dude trying to be Spider-Man, but I couldn't. Over the years, they added Kate Bishop and Hawkeye DLC. It was decent, but it was short. But I loved the storyline with Maestro Hulk, you know, trying to, as he says, prevent the end of the world, but in reality he had caused the end of the world. And we had the War for Wakanda expansion, which was the best update, which introduced Black Panther and a new biome. We also had Jane Foster, which was the Mighty Thor. She was added during Thor Love and Thunder hype, which is also a failed movie. And lastly, they also added the Winter Soldier during their final moments of the game's decline. But by 2023, the update slowed to a crawl, players left the game, and the game never really recovered its player base, which really sucks because it was such a good game to an extent. Why the game failed, why did it flop? Well, it had an identity crisis in a way. It wanted to be a cinematic single player game and a live service looter at the same time, and if you combine the two and you don't do it right, you kind of lose both aspects of what the game should have been. It had a technical issue, a lot of them, to be honest, bugs, frame drops, crashes, especially during launch. Obviously, when they fixed it post-launch, it was fixed, but a lot of people still had some issues with bugs. It had a monetization issue, which is a full game, so we're talking in Australia $99 to $109 at full price, where you have a battle pass and skins you need to pay for. That sucks, and a lot of people felt betrayed. I think that was another main reason why I couldn't get the game during that time, because it was $100. I managed to get the game when it was $40, which was pretty cool, but I still didn't want to spend the money on that, because, you know, you pay full price for a game, but the characters and the cosmetics you need to pay more for. I don't know. And it had a lot of slow content pipeline. The live service games, the level would die, but the content updates, they cause their death, usually. You know, if you don't have consistent updates, then it's not going to work. And that, unfortunately, Avengers didn't deliver fast enough on the content and the updates, which caused its decline as well. And it had a lack of meaningful customizations. Gear barely changed how you played, but also the skins, they were amazing, but most of them were recolors of their counterparts, which kind of sucked a lot. Imagine trying to upgrade your battle pass, like the little free one you get with each character at the start of the game, but at the end of it, they're all just reskins of your character. Some of them looked cool, whereas others just looked like completely completely like they shouldn't be a part of the game. And even Crystal Dynamics admitted later on that they focused too much on the live service instead of the core gaming experience, which kind of sucks because you really want them to push through to make it a good game. And this is the most painful part, because Marvel's Avengers could have been incredible if Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics had gone in different direction. Imagine this: a single player or co-op open world Avengers game like Spider-Man or Guardians of the Galaxy, focused on story and hero moments instead of loot and grind. And we saw them. They actually made Guardians of the Galaxy an amazing game. It's a team-based game. It doesn't have the free roam aspects of it, but it was such an amazing story that it left me feeling fulfilled after playing it. Deep hero customizations, and not just like stats and skill trees, but gear that actually changes how your abilities work. Think of games like Diablo or Borderlands, but have it superhero themed. I wish it had more meaningful endgame content. Raids against iconic villains like Galactus, Kang, or even Ultron with multi-stage battles instead of fighting the same robots for the 50th time or 100th time, depending on how long you've played this game. But it was such a boring and a like the meaningful content was not meaningful. I wish it was a meaningful endgame, but we didn't get that. And I wish there was cross-platform synergy with the MCU, tying content during major Marvel movies or Disney Plus shows to keep the players engaged. We kind of saw that, but, we didn't. The only time they did that was with Thor: Love and Thunder and, Spider-Man, but that's about it. If the game had launched as a premium story-driven title like Guardians of the Galaxy, with operational expansions, rather than forcing live service mechanics, it could have gone down as one of the greatest superhero games ever made, which unfortunately it has not done that. And we're stuck here now 5 years later and talking about why it failed and why it didn't stand the way it should have. We're also going to talk about the abandoned storyline and teases. So one of the most frustrating things, and I hated this a lot about the story, only one thing I hated was the teases that Crystal Dynamics did. They had plans for a much larger narrative beyond the main campaign, but most of it never came. The Kree invasion, the game constantly hinted at the Kree, especially through the storyline of Captain Marvel and the mysterious pods seen in the post-credit scenes. This was supposed to lead into a massive cosmic arc, and it annoys me so much because I wish we got that, and I would have loved to play that, but instead they kept on forcing the live service aspect of the game instead of expanding it in that regard. They also had Captain Marvel DLC planned apparently, and it was teased throughout the story multiple times, and players expected her as a major playable hero, or even just DLC, but she never came. We got the Winter Soldier, but we did not get Captain Marvel. Ultron storyline, there were data mined voice lines and clues suggesting Ultron would rise, possibly replacing AIM as the main villain faction, which would have been amazing. I wish if they kept pumping out free DLC, would have loved to have a DLC based off of Ultron and his storyline throughout the game. Apparently She-Hulk and Quake were also leaked and partially confirmed by devs as well, but they never actually came through. They never appeared. She-Hulk even had some in-game references, but never appeared, which kinda sucks. And according to reports, the Latveria storyline was on the roadmap for a future expansion, setting up an Avengers vs. Doom war scenario. All of this sounds incredible, but instead the game barely scratched the surface, and what could have been an expanding Marvel universe inside the gaming world turned into a few small hero drops and some side missions, which unfortunately kind of ruined the experience of the game. And I kind of wish they didn't do that, and I wish that they stuck with what they should have done instead of teasing storylines of. And in the Maestro DLC with the Hawkeye, you get shown the end of the world because of the Kree invasion, but that's it. Like, you don't really know much more about it. And where it stands now, 2025, 5 years after the release, in 2023, they officially announced the end of support. Now, no new content, no new patches. Servers are still up, but players are not. They're pretty much non-existent to this day on the server, and the game exists as a cautionary tale and a reminder that even the biggest IP can fail without the right vision. You know, at the moment it's not really doing much, not much people are playing the game's not really alive, and yeah, unfortunately that's the status of the game now. Marvel's Avengers could have been the superhero game of a generation, but instead it became a case study in how to not make a live service title. 5 years later, it's clear, it's great characters, strong IP isn't enough. However, you need a solid foundation and respect for players and content that actually keeps them coming back, and I wish that they had that type of content. You know, they did it with Black Panther, they brought some players back, but they fell pretty hard afterwards. But what do you guys think? Could Marvel Avengers have succeeded if it launched as a single player game, or was it doomed from the start? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dive. See you soon, and see you guys in the next one. This is the Avenger signing off. Have a great day.